Can you now see the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get on with it then. So who's it for? On a normal day's local flying, then the DI will check the NOTAMs, but every pilot's got a personal responsibility if you're going to do anything more exciting than just fly around the circuit in the local area. So what is a NOTAM? Officially, they can concern the condition or change to any facility, service or procedure as notified within the AIP, which is the Bible about all things airspace and everything flying in the UK. They're available in form of pre-flight information bulletins using a live database, which is provided by NATS, and it's called the AIS, the Aeronautical Information Service. All this is legally in law binding for you. In general, they're classified as either a warning or an avoid, and we'll come back to that later. It includes all sorts of things like air exercises, airspace restrictions, pipeline inspections, aerodrome limitations if somebody's approach is down. So there's a lot of stuff in there that you don't really worry about, as well as some really important things. So it's really a case of finding out what's important for you. Why? Obviously, there is a threat and error management angle to this and for safety, but please don't forget that it also enables the efficient, flexible use of airspace. If we did not have a trustworthy NOTAM system, which people followed, all that would happen is people would grab airspace and close it down. So you'll notice that NOTAMs are time limited as well as space limited. So when should you check it? You can check it the night before, but usually it's worth doing on the morning of your intended flight. Please note that all times are UTC and the clocks are springing forward at the end of the month, aren't they? The day before we go back flying, I think. So check the effective dates and times very carefully, because you could be worrying about something that's already passed or doesn't cover your time period. And then when you found your NOTAMs, and I'll tell you how to do those in a minute, avoid them, obviously, but I would also mark them on the map if they're anywhere near your track, because you may want to deviate from your track and you want to know where the threats are. So where do you find them? You'll find them on the NATS AIS website, and also on the club. We have a thing called Spine, but there's also systems like Sky Demon, and there are many other systems as well. And I'd like to just say a couple of words about each of them to give you a steer. Okay, the first one is NATS, which NATS is the, should we say, the company arm of the CAA, and it's responsible for aeronautical information services. So the list of types of NOTAMs, and some of them won't affect us. One is an aerodrome brief, the fact that Waddington's lights are US or something. One is an area brief, which can cover the whole of an FIR and aerodromes. A route brief, where you can put in a set route and it will give you all the NOTAMs in that area. But what's more useful is a narrow route brief, where you define, say, 20 miles width or 40 miles width, and it will give you less NOTAMs. The whole point is, if you dump down to yourself the whole of the NOTAM list for your FIR, for your area, you will get just hundreds of NOTAMs. So the idea is to try and weed it down a bit. A point brief, a VFR, FIR brief, and a VFR for Southern England and one for Northern England. And then you can save briefings as well. The problem with the NATS is, and I've spoken to them about this, is they have not digitized their system in a way where they produce a map which you can then use to visualize the things very, very easily. But others take their data and do so for you. But the Bible is still the AIS, the NATS AIS. So please bear that in mind. The difficulty then is you get an output like this, which is pages long, and you have to decode it, although the main message is down below. You have to work out exactly what the time and area is. So it's not very user-friendly, but as I say, it is the Bible. We then have Spine, which we have in the club. Frankly, in my opinion, it's of limited use, although many people try to use it. mainly because it gives you a whole printout of NOTAMs and gives you a fairly primitive, if I can use that word, and I hope I'm not upsetting anybody, map presentation. There are also people like NOTAM Info, which is on that website, which do the same, but actually go one step further by allowing you to have a map to zoom into. So I'll just go on to that. It gives you a map presentation like that. And if you are interested in a particular NOTAM, you click on it. And for this one, for instance, it's about Cyreston for red arrows displays, and puts an area around it so you get the detail there, okay? So that's more useful. However, in my humble opinion, Sky Demon, which has many other facilities as well, is much more user friendly. And I just prepared this one earlier, which is a just tour of the local glider sites. But here you have a map, and on that map will be all the NOTAMs and the normal airspace as well, okay? And you can see on this particular day, there's not a lot going on, except for something happening down on the bottom left here. The good news is you can just click on the, can you see my arrow there? Click on the right-hand tab for NOTAMs. The other thing is it gives you the weather as well, with these arrows of where the wind's coming from. And it gives you if you just set up a route, or you can just look for the area you're in, but it gives you a sort of track, which tells you if you're impinging in any NOTAMs, just in a 3D visual thing as well, okay? So let's just assume that that's our track for today. So everything's looking pretty good. But I want to find out what's happening. And I can go through the whole list of NOTAMs on the right, which will have things like don't fly over Afghanistan. Don't forget about COVID. If you come back from France, you'll be treated like the lurgy, etc., etc. That's all down there, but it's in English, not in gibberish, okay? So it's much more digestible. Now, looking at this area down here, what is it? It's aerial survey schedule, surface to 1,000 feet. And when you cross-check, it's actually the pipeline inspection. These guys are pretty low down, but they can go up to 2,000 feet. So that's a sort of warning, okay? It's not an avoid, but you have to be aware that you are making a risk decision if you go into an area that has a warning NOTAM. If it's one that closes that airspace, then you just can't go in there, okay? Or certainly not without permission. So you can see on one chart here, the reason I like it and I use it is you can get it on your iPad at the club, and you can draw your route or intended area and get all the NOTAMs, all the gen, all the, look at these here. They also have the BJ turn points as well, which is even more useful in some ways, and the wind and everything else, okay? So I'm going to try and persuade John Elkington and Lynn to allow us to fork out the money to have a subscription to this, which is not very much. Many of the serious cross-country pilots in the club already have this, so if you want to borrow mine, please let me know. So they're the three systems, and you've seen, and there are others coming on because this is a growth industry now to make things easier for pilots, okay? So having done that though, there's still a belt and braces thing. If you look on the board in our crew when you're allowed into it, you'll notice that there's a phone number for AIS, and it has a recorded message, which is always done at 6 o'clock the previous night. And those are the numbers, and they're on the wall there. And what it will give you is two very important bits of information, which are really last-ditch maneuvers. Now, you should have seen them on your NOTAM list, but it's a final check, and it may be because something's changed. The first one is restrictions to flying. And a good example of this is the red arrows displays. They are a real no-no. If you want to find yourself grounded for a number of years or in court, you know, don't pay heed to what I'm saying, because you will get arrested if you close down a red arrows display these days. Now, the routes of red arrows are slightly different. They are not, they're just to warn you that that's the way they're going. They generally fly quite low level, as low as they can, 500 feet or so. And they will always call, they're very good at calling the glider sites and airfields as they're going past, just to tell you that they're going past wherever they're going to do their display. The restriction to flying is particularly the 5 to 10 nautical miles around wherever they are, Scarborough, Waddington, Cyreston, or whatever. And that's the bit you have to avoid. The other thing it will tell you on that recorded message is airspace reclassification. And this is a coded way of saying if there's a Royal flight or a Royal helicopter flight coming in your area, they will reclassify the airspace. So that's another head up for you. And I would just avoid that area, whatever. Fortunately, a lot of Royal flights are done in airways now, so they just become part of the airspace system rather than a separate entity. But on helicopters, it can be of interest. Another thing to do, and it's really true of what Chris said about weather as well, is you must chat to your mates and see how they see a good day coming, and talk to people like Les and Chris and others about what it looks like a good day. But also on NOTAMs, if you've done your best to find out what the NOTAMs are on your route, just bounce it off somebody else who's also flying that day, and you might find that they found out something that you haven't realized. Okay, so this is where teamwork comes in. So let's talk to each other and compare notes, especially if it seems a bit strange and it could be misplotted or whatever. So do talk to people. If after flight, though, you, despite all your best efforts, have rogered some bit of airspace or something, it's far better to own up, make a quick call and apologize than let them come and find you, honestly. It's always the best, honesty is the best policy. And if we can help you in that way, please let us know. But this adherence to the NOTAM system is very, very serious for us glider pilots, because we have a very good reputation about airspace and stuff, and we want to keep it that way. So all of the instructors will expect you to know how the NOTAM system works, to practice, even when you're not flying that day. Do it for tomorrow. Look up the NOTAMs and see what's going on. And you'll get a sort of feel for the flow of the NOTAMs, and some things are long-term and some things are short-term and some things are periodic. And you get a sort of feel for the drumbeat of the NOTAMs. And of course, naturally, in the summer, it gets busier and busier, especially with the air show system. Here ends the lesson. Chris, any questions at this stage, or do you want to wait till later?
I think that's very good. Thank you, Phil. If anyone's got any questions now about NOTAMs, please ask them.
Phil, there is a free Sky Demon Lite, which I use.
Yep. Okay. I mean, if you want just the NOTAMs and stuff, Sky, if you want the whole shebang, you pay a limited fee for the year. But you're absolutely right, Les. Anything else?
If you use the NOTAM information on one of these systems, are they liable for making sure it's up to AIS NAT standards?
Well, that's a very, very good question. The problem is nobody trusts anybody in this game. So AIS will say, even the thing that you hear on the recorded message from AIS on the night before or the morning of your thing about red arrows or everything, it says this cannot be used for briefing or something like that to cover themselves. The only Bible is the AIS. So strictly, if you wanted to be 1000% certain, you'd want to delegate somebody to actually go through the whole AIS and make sure nothing has been missed. But of course, on the contrary to that, the reputation of these newer systems, and I'm thinking of NOTAM Info and even Spine, although I'm worried about whether Spine is going to stay with us, or Sky Demon, their whole reputation is based on getting this right. So the trouble is, nobody will admit liability. So all you can do is do your best. And if you can show that you've done your best, that is a fair defense. I don't think that's a very satisfactory situation personally. And I think the answer to that is AIS invest in a visual display which is usable, which they have patently failed to do over the last 20 years.
Excellent answer, very clear, Phil. I have to say that SD Lite is a good training scheme. If you think you want to go further later and pay for it, great. And also backing up, the Reds are absolutely fantastic about their transits.
Yeah.
Phil, is it possible to get a club subscription to Sky Demon that club members can use, log in and use, or do we have to have individual ones?
No, I need to check on that, John. I was just offering people to borrow mine. I think there is, and we just need to find out. If you like, I'll look into it and get back to you.
Please, if you wouldn't mind.
I have to say, every time I try and look at Spine, and that's the one on our dodgy, if I can use that word, computer in the crew room, my computer won't let me load down, even look at the website. It says it's an unsafe website. I can't even look it up. So I'm worried about Spine, but I'm also worried when duty instructors come out. Well, I've already checked the NOTAMs, of course, by then. But when they come out and wave a map and a list with a whole bloody load of circles, which make no sense to me at all, compared with when I can look up in real time the Sky Demon one, for example. I mean, there are other products, obviously, but they happen to be the fleet leaders, I think, at the moment. So there are a few that people can use. So, John, if you're happy, I'll get back to you, having discovered whether we can go for a group membership.
Yes, please, Phil. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
I
Anything
have
else?
noted a few errors at times with Spine, so I don't use it.
Yeah, me too, Les.
Okay, thanks, Phil. That's
You
really
seem to
good.
have fallen off your chair, Les.
No, I'm standing.
Okay, Chris, I'm stopping sharing now.
Excellent. If you can pass me back so I can share. But let me see if I can share anyway.
Oh,
No.
I've just stopped sharing, so I assumed it went back to you.
No, so if you make me the host now.
Double click on Chris's image, Phil, and then it should give the option to you to make him host.
Double right click or?
Just single right click or something. Depends what.
There you go, Chris. Thanks for that, chaps.
Thank you. Okay. So back to where we were. So in terms of planning, you looked at the NOTAMs, you know the weather's going to be good. In terms of planning the task, again, for a 50K or 100K flight, you don't need to get overly complicated using the task planning software. 50K flights, if you're doing your silver, talk to an instructor, talk to a more experienced cross-country pilot, but make sure you understand what the Silver Sea rules are, because they have changed, and some people will very happily assert that you can do thing A when in fact you can't. But for 100K triangle, we've got club ones. There is software you can use. TaskNav is really getting old now, but it's free. CU, if you've got it, is an excellent product and you can use it. But again, because you're staying for 50K or 100K flight, you're going to be staying local to Salisbury or your gliding club. So don't worry about that too much. And you can just use your chart and a pen as long as you've got an up-to-date chart. So let's have a look at this this task then. So this is it's a 120K task. A couple of questions, so you need to get your mute buttons undone. So I set a task like this. What wind direction might be suitable for a task like this?
Southeasterly.
Yeah. So something that's broad. Why is that?
Because presumably you're going to set off with good soaring in the middle of the day, but on your returning, the chances are the soaring is not going to be quite as good, and you're going to need to have some help, i.e. the wind, behind you on your way back.
Yeah, that's possibly that's a good answer. Any other reasons why a sort of wind that's either going from top left to bottom right or bottom right to top left would be sensible on a task like this? Streeting. So if we get a bit of very good. If we get a bit of streeting where the thermals line up with the wind, it's easier to follow the energy on a task like that. If you're going up and down wind. Again, if you're doing a 50K, you'd probably be doing this where the wind was coming from Saltby and blowing towards March. So you've got a sort of 50K leg that's downwind, and we'll come on to why that is later. Okay, so if you can see, Mark, for those that don't know the area, this is Bourne. It's a little village which stands out really nicely. If there was an air display NOTAMs over Bourne, what might you do about it and this task?
Change whether you do it clockwise or anti-clockwise so that you pass it after it's finished.
Yeah, you might choose to go down here first and pass it, or indeed go to the north of it, or you might indeed decide that for your 50k, if this I don't know why they'd have a massive, great all-day air display. You might decide to do a different task. The other one is, as Phil mentioned, the timing of these is based on UTC. So if it's, for example, in the evening, very often in the summer they are, if it's sort of 6 p.m. UTC, so 7 p.m. local time or whatever, you don't have to worry about it because you're not going to be over there at that time. But again, just think about it. What you shouldn't do is just say, I'll probably be all right, and just try and ignore it, because it's one of the things you'll be fretting around. And if there was one, you definitely want to write it on your chart, know exactly what the time is and what the ground feature is, so that you're not trying to remember, oh, there was vaguely, it was somewhere and I can't remember what it is. Okay, so here we've got the Wittering mats. And we're the track line, because we're going from Saltby to March to Crowland Airfield and back, takes us straight through the stub. How are we going to deal with that on our flight?
Give them a call.
Give them a call?
Not really a big problem. If you're soaring, you might even not even make the stub, or you might be above the height of that stub anyway, depending on the cloud base. Yeah.
Or go around it.
Go around it. So I think for your 50k or 100k flight, i.e. an early cross-country flight, you could use the radio. And if you're someone who's come from power and you're using the radio is second nature to you, that's absolutely fine. No issues at all. But for most, for a lot of glider pilots, using the radio is something which takes up a lot of thought process, especially early on. So calling them up might not be the thing you want to do on a first flight. But in this case, I mean, if I was flying it, I would, even if the first leg is down here, as long as the conditions are okay, I'd be tracking north. I'd probably be going towards Crowland and just making sure I was avoiding it. What you shouldn't do is completely avoid the fact this is here and just say, well, I'm allowed in the mats, because A, it's unprofessional, and B, they have big things flying in and out, and big things and little gliders don't mix particularly well. What other airspace on this chart might we want to consider? If you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. You can just sort of point out where it is.
Fenland.
Fenland. So Fenland is up here. Absolutely. So again, if we're staying to the south of Crowland Airfield, not an issue. If we found ourselves sort of, for whatever reason, in good conditions over here, we'd have to think very careful about not just barging through that. What else?
Chatteris.
Chatteris. Anyone know what Chatteris is?
Yes. Good.
Parachuting. Parachutists. And parachutists, you definitely want. Chatteris is down here. Again, if you're flying towards March and turning, you shouldn't be too worried about it. But if for whatever reason there's a bit of north in the wind and you're getting south of track, well, you can imagine, this is not a good place to be sort of trying to find a thermal around here. So again, just be aware of it. We've got clearly we've got Wittering we've already mentioned. Things like Langer we don't have to worry about, because on a task like this we're not going anywhere near there, except if you're local soaring beforehand, don't just switch off. In this task, what's the relevance? So we're going from Saltby 10.1, March 10.2, Crowland 10.0, the second 10.0, then back to Saltby. Why have I put Crowland Airfield there?
As a possible land out.
Exactly. On your early cross-country flights, if there's a gliding club you can use as a stepping stone, use it. Hopefully, you'll see it from 4,500 feet. It'll be the closest you get to it, and you'll have a great flight back to Saltby. But having a a gliding club that's either a turn point, or even if it's just close by, if you were say going to Spalding and down, so that you're passing near, is really helpful on those early cross-country flights, because it takes away the pressure. You know, you know that if you've got to, if you're flying down here and you've got to Bourne and you're at 3,500 feet, you know you can get to Crowland comfortably, especially if it's downwind, and it just takes away the pressure a huge amount. And in fact, on a flight like this, if you're doing this, you would probably mentally be thinking, I'm gonna get to Crowland, I'm gonna go to March, I'm gonna get to Crowland again, and I'm gonna go back to Saltbury. And it's that sort of thought process that, again, for longer flights, you won't always have that luxury. And if you're racing, it's probably not an optimum thing to do. But for early flights, think about the airfield. And the other thing to think about is what zones are you going to use for the task? And that will largely depend on what you're doing. So if you're doing a Silver Sea attempt, there are very specific zones that you have to use, and we'll come to that in a second. So you need to make sure you've got the size and the shape and you understand that. But I think we're coming on to that next. Yeah. So there's a thing called the FAI Sporting Code, and in there, in the IGC documents, it details for a Silver Sea attempt or a 100K diploma what the rules are. How big is the start line? How big? What turn points can you use? What's the start height? What about the 1% rule? Now I haven't checked it for this year, so I've got no idea whether it's changed. But I know it does change over time. So make sure that you've read that and understood it, because people have been caught out by thinking that they can do thing A and then discovering that that makes it invalid. And the start line is a very good one. If you're flying in a competition, you might have a 12-kilometer start line. For a badge attempt, you've got a 1-kilometer start line, which isn't very big.
And also, Chris, if it says whatever the start line is, that's normally, you have to be careful of whether it says radius or total length.
Absolutely.
People have actually lost competitions on failing to read that.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, if you're not familiar with that, just go and look on the FIA website. So here's a couple of examples of start lines. So you might have this is Saltbury Airfield, a 0.5K radius start line going in this direction, because it's perpendicular to your outward leg, isn't actually very big. So if you're over here somewhere, you might fly from over here and cross Saltbury, but you haven't made a valid start. This shape here for a turn point is a combination of a 0.5-kilometer radius cylinder and I think it's a 5-kilometer quadrant. But again, check. This is called a BGA enhanced sector, where you can combine them both. But for a badge flight, you've either got to choose to do turn point cylinders or quadrants. And if you mix and match them in the wrong way, you can have problems. So just make sure you understand what they are.
What would you recommend, Chris?
I'd recommend reading the guide and finding out what you need to do. If I'm just flying for pleasure, I will almost certainly use an enhanced sector, because it means if it's raining over here, I can pop in over here and do something. Normally, on a good day, you tend to use the beer barrels, the 0.5-kilometer radius, but just because it gives you you're just popping in and popping out, and once you've hit that zone, you can carry on. But you need to think about the conditions. If it's likely to be poor weather, then you might want to think about quadrants. Okay, marking the map, marking the chart. It's really important. We've all got PDAs and they're really nice and snazzy, but having on your chart the tasks that you've going to fly marked up is really useful for giving you the big picture. We just zoom back to, that's not a chart, but if you've got an image like that, you kind of know which way around am I going, where, you know, where, if you're flying down here, what's that big deal? It's Peterborough. I can see there's an airfield down there. What is it? Just gives you that big picture. You can mark on it, you know, you could, if there was something overborne, you could put on there that there's a NOTAM. It's really important, not only to help you when you're flying, but help you when you're planning the task and just thinking about, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And mentally, whilst your PDA might just be showing you this little bit where you are, having a chart says, actually, I know if I can get to Bourne, I'm in gliding distance of Crowland, that sort of thing. It's really an important thing to do. And I would mark on my chart, you know, the wind direction, any NOTAMed areas. I highlight other gliding clubs just as even though my PDA. So is that a comment?
Somebody from Paddy's logged on somehow.
Oh well. So just get used to marking that. Is Roger on the call today?
Yeah.
Because Roger did an excellent session last year on actually how to mark your chart up, and if we, you know, that's something we could do again when we can meet and you can show people what to do.
Okay.
Okay, declaring your task. Again, for a badge flight, you need to make a declaration. Sometimes you can do that on your logger if you know how to do it. Sometimes you might need a piece of paper. I would suggest for your early flights, just get a piece of paper. It'll help you. It helps with the preparation anyway. But also tell the duty instructor so he or she knows what you're planning to do, and you know, they can help check. Well, they know where you are. If you land out, they've got more of an idea of where you are. There is a declaration form such as this on the BGA website, and again, it's a useful thing to do. If you're thinking about doing a silver flight, it's a good idea to have printed one of these off at home rather than scrabbling around at the club trying to find out where the ink for the printer is and why the mouse doesn't work, and you can't get the printer to connect. That's not what you want to be doing on the morning of a good flight.
Great. So another club I used to fly out, another big situational awareness thing is they had a big chalkboard on the side of the bus, and anybody declaring a cross-country flight used to put up their task and sign it on the chalkboard so that everybody knew who was doing what. And there's a big, it aided every situational awareness, certainly if somebody was landing out or somebody was overdue.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, as you know, you can't really go on an early cross country without having agreed it with the duty instructor, had it approved by the duty instructor, and then they need to make sure you've ticked all the boxes, like you've made sure you've got the crew and all that kind of stuff. And like you say, we've got a duty of care to make sure if you do land out that everybody's safe and all that kind of good stuff.
Hold on.
Okay. Can you? So I've got your internet is unstable. The next thing, you're going to need a logger of some description. The old days when you had a nice camera and a barograph to smoke have long since gone. I'm going to go as far as to say that when we do have some loggers in the gliding club, which is good. Whether they're charged or not, I've got no idea. Where they are, I've got no idea. And if you're thinking of doing a cross-country flight and you don't have your own logger, you need to be planning this beforehand. You need to know where they are, whether they're charged, how to use them, how you're going to download the flight off it, where you're going to mount it in the glider. A couple of years ago, you know, you have a situation where the poor pilot's sitting in the K8. They've got like 3 tons of cabling around them that connect some Garmin GPS to some logger they've never used before. It's not good. It doesn't help. It just builds up the pressure. If you can afford to buy your own logger, even if it's a IGC position recorder, which is good enough for silver and gold, and they're about £100, £120, I would thoroughly recommend it. Second-hand Calibris like the one there come up for not much more money as well. It's a really useful thing to have. you can record your flights. You know it's going to work. Mount it with some Velcro, something like that. You can make sure it's charged. It will just it makes life a lot easier. Does the Loughborough Astia have a logger built into it?
Yeah, it's got a proper flarm in it.
Proper flarm logger. Okay.
Chris, just from a club perspective, there's 2 of those pendant loggers. They live in LC in the right-hand drawer. The best thing to do is take it out in the morning if you're going to do this and put it. There's a charging point in LC so that you can charge it up whilst you make your prep and all that kind of stuff. So there's 2 of those there.
And then make sure you know how to turn it on.
Yeah, that's a really good
seriously,
advice.
because it's it's the
yeah. You're absolutely right.
And unfortunately, even though the world trusts you and you're a good egg and everything else, if you do your flight and you haven't got a logger trace, it won't count. It can't count. That's just the way it works. And then I promise I will do my OO thing this year. I promise to be an OO so I can help download these.
I gave you a piece of paper during our task week last year, Chris.
I know, I lost it. It's pathetic. Okay, so we still haven't got airborne yet. The next thing to do is get the glider ready. So is it rigged and DI'd? Have you done the positive checks? Have you checked the tyre pressure? Have you taped it up? Is the canopy clean? Is the battery charged? Is the battery installed? All of these questions, the time to be doing that is early in the morning. I love this picture of the Lebel with the tail dolly still on. It's just a classic sort of too much going on, didn't pay attention. Have you got a map? Have you got water to drink? Have you got snacks? And as soon as you've got all that ready, tow out to the launch point and park it up on the side, park your glider up on the side. The sooner you can get that done, the glider ready, absolutely everything you need. It's just one thing off the list. Get good, you can go, as opposed to saying, oh, I haven't done a positive control check, or I need to find the weights that will go in it, or whatever it is. So again, really important you get that done nice and early.
You haven't got a P bag on there. Have you got an Ironman bladder?
50k. Even my bladder will last to 50k, even at the speed I fly. Actually, it's a serious point, Roger. That's one of the things we'll be covering when we look at doing longer flights. The need for peeing. And then finally, what about you? You've got a glider ready, but how are you? If you've got a raging hangover, or you're not feeling particularly well, you had your jab yesterday and you've got a bit of a headache or not very good, or you're massively stressed out, or you're not eating properly, or you feel a bit sick, don't do it. It's really important, especially when you're doing something relatively stressful like a first cross country. If you're not feeling up for it, don't do it, because you might be able to cope when you're at 4,000 feet and thermaling nicely, but once you're down at sort of 1,200 feet, scrabbling over a rubbish field, if you're not feeling well, that's when things really start going wrong. Making sure you've got you've got sunglasses. You're going to need sunglasses. Have you got a hat? What footwear are you wearing? If you're wearing flip-flops and you're going on a cross-country flight and you land in the field, that's not a good thing to be doing. Is your phone number charged? Has it got the right numbers in? And have you got? Is there any niggling questions? Are you thinking, oh, I really wish I'd checked that thing, or whatever it is? So the more you can do this, the more you can say, yeah, I've done everything. I'm happy. I'm ready to go. The more you'll be in the right frame of mind. And then, water ballast or not? No, not for your first few cross countries. Don't care how good it is. And the other thing is to try nothing new on the first country. This is cross country. You see loads of people. They've whatever it is. It's a new logger. They put a new vario in. They've got a new chart. They've whatever it is, and they're going to go cross country on the first one. Your cross country, first couple of cross countries, are not the time to be trying out new equipment. Fly locally for that. Go and do a couple of hours soaring with the new vario to get used to it, or sit in the cockpit and play with it. Nothing new on your first cross country flight. Crew and trailer is really important. With a well-planned cross country flight, you won't need crew. even if we do a 50k and we fly back to Corolla, you probably won't need a crew, but you might. And if you've got the crew ready, they know who the crew are, you've got their phone numbers, the trailer's roadworthy and ready to go, it will just take the pressure off. There's no, again, as you get low, and you probably will get low at some point in your, or lower than you might like when you're cross country, fretting over, oh God, I never pumped up that tire. Oh, I don't know who's got the keys for the trailer. I hope the tow bar got mended. It's not the time to do it. So these are, again, really important things that you need to plan in advance. How are you going to communicate your location if you land out? What 3 words? I'm sure everyone's got it. If you haven't got it, download it. It's a free app. It's brilliant because it just aids the ability to tell other people exactly where you've landed out. And then things like car insurance and towing ability. It's all very well saying, can you come and get me? Yeah, I'll come and get you. But whose cars are they going to use? Either your car or their car? Just agree those things up front. You're not going to be left in a field, but the more you can do to help yourself, the less stress you'll be under, the less chance there is of landing out in the first place. And finally, make sure you've got a land out bag in your glider, which is just something that's got, it might just have a thin sort of a raincoat in case it rains. It might have a spare pair of trousers in case you like to pee yourself. It might have some money. It might have a handkerchief, some wipes, whatever it is you think you should have in the land out bag. They don't have to be very big. I have one in the back of my lapel. There's not much space, but it's just so if you do land out, you've got a pair of headphones is good if you want to listen to some music while you're waiting for a retrieve. Those sort of things in a land out bag. Again, it's preparation for if you do land in the field. Okay, so that was the pre-flight stuff. We'll start going through some of this, and then we'll probably run about 10 minutes late, and then we'll stop and we'll pick some more of it up next week. So the first question is, when to launch? So tow out nice and early. There are 2 extremes here that you don't want to do. And remember, we're talking about a first cross-country flight where you've probably got, if it's a good day, there's no need to go to launch in the very first puff of a cumulus. Equally, there's no need to wait until 4 p.m. when everyone's been up to 5,000 feet and said how marvelous it is. And you've been thinking, oh, should I? And then all of a sudden you decide to go just as it dies. So launch as soon as it looks soarable, reasonably soarable. And you can tell it's soarable if other gliders are staying up, if the clouds look good, if there are shopping trolleys thermaling above you because the lift is so strong. Make the decision to launch and get on the queue. There's nothing worse than looking out, you're sitting on the bus when we were allowed to sit on the bus, in fact when we had a bus, looking out saying, oh, I think it might be okay. I'll think about it. And the next time you look 2 minutes later, there's 12 other gliders who decided the same process as you, that they're now in the queue. So as soon as you're ready, get out there. You don't have to, there's nothing that says you must start your task within 10 minutes of launching. You can go up, we'll cover this in a second. You can have an hour's local soaring just to get used to it. But as soon as you think it's soarable, get in the launch queue and fly. Because then, once you're in the air, that gives you time to assess the day versus the forecast. I was expecting a 4,000-foot cloud base and 3 knots. It's actually 2,000 feet and half a knot. I'll carry on soaring, but I'm not ready to go cross country. Gives you a chance to sample a few climbs before making a start. And if it all goes wrong, it gives you time for a relight. And as I say, don't wait until it's booming. If you're waiting for someone to radio down that the cloud base is 4,500 feet, you've missed a good chunk of the day. We're getting to the stuff now which sounds really simple, but for me, will be the difference between you immediately landing in a field 10 kilometers down track and having a really nice cross-country flight. Focus on the launch. Think of nothing else. Don't look at your PDA. Your first thing to do is safely get launched. So you've done the preparation, you've pulled into the launch queue, that's one thing. You've got into the glider, you're going to focus on a good launch, whether it's a winch launch or an aerotow. Just focus on the launch. If you're happy with the launch, if you have a winch launch and you only got 800 feet, land. have another one. Don't fret it. You don't have to get away. Focus on the launch. Once you're launched, don't think about starting your cross country yet. Just say to yourself, for the next half an hour, I'm going to sample 3 or 4 clouds. I'm going to try 2 or 3 thermals. What I'm not going to do is get into one thermal that's climbing at 1/4 of a knot, get to cloud base and say, oh, that was good, because you've learned nothing. So the questions you're asking yourself are, how strong are the thermals? If you've tried 4 clouds and only one of them had a thermal and it was rough as old dog, it's probably not the weather for a first cross-country flight. If you've tried 3 or 4 clouds and 3 of them have lovely 3-knot thermals, and the third one got you to 4,500 feet, happy days. That's a good idea that the clouds are working. How strong is the sink? I'm sure everyone has flown on days when the lift has been strong, but the sink has been horrendous. You've been flying along and the Vario's going boom, as you're sort of 5 or 6 or 7 knots down. That might be wave influence, in which case you might want to think, actually, is this the day for my first cross-country flight? Do I want to be doing a 50K in a K8 when there are 7 knots of sink? And if it isn't, then don't. Just stay local. Where's the lift? Is it on the sunny side of the clouds, the upwind side of the clouds, the center of the clouds? Is it the big clouds? Is it the little clouds? Is there no way of telling? Each day will be different. Some days it's the big clouds with the firm grey bases that do the trick. Other days, by the time they've developed big bases, the lift has gone. So just get used to that. And then start to think about this.
Now, that's enough of that. Come on now, stop fighting.
Conditions down track. So before you've even started, just start thinking, okay, I know that my track is down towards Bourne. I'm going to look out from local soaring. What does it look at there? Is there a massive rain shower down there? Is it gone completely blue in that direction? Just think about those things. Is there sun on the ground? And the other thing to do, which is really useful, while you're still in this pre-start, fly slightly down the track you intend to go down and have a look at the fields. So are there big fields there? If it's late August, there are some big cut fields. That will give you the confidence that when you're coming back in that direction, assuming you're coming back in the same direction, but you're basically doing this in the area that you're going to be coming back. Have a look at the fields. If they're nice and big and empty, it just gives you confidence that if you do get low, there'll be something there. If they're all full of wheat and they're all looking a bit small because of the direction you chose, not necessarily a problem if you're going to stay high, but it's good to try and know that in advance. And the real question you're asking yourself in this pre-start phase is, does what I'm experiencing match what I thought I was going to get? And is it good enough for a nice, comfortable 50K or 100K? There's nothing worse than thinking, well, I've got all my stuff ready. I'm going to go anyway and see what happens. It won't end well. The weather's not going to magically change. So making a start, again, we mentioned this before. So you've been flying around for half an hour. You've got to 4,000 feet a couple of times. You're happy with the conditions. You need to think about how you're going to make a start. And if this is our task and our start line, you need to, what you want to be is behind the start line, which I mean the other side of where the task is. Get into a thermal and climb to cloud base, whatever cloud base is. And then just slowly head towards the start line. If you've got a PDA, normally what will happen is that will ping and say you've made a start. For some tasks there might be 1,000-meter rule which says, or another rule about the start height. So just be aware of that. And then just identify the direction you're going to go. Where am I? This may be the task, but the nice cloud may be over here or over here. And just this is the point when you start to go from, okay, I'm just flying locally here. I'm going to make a start. Ping, you've made a start. Look for the log for confirmation, and now you're thinking about flying cross country. But as we go through the start line, you're still local to Saltby, so don't start panicking yet. And this is where the next important thing comes in. The first 10 kilometers. Assuming you started at a reasonable height, 3,500, 4,000 feet, the next 10 kilometers you do, you're still going to be in gliding distance of Saltpeter. So you don't yet have to make the I'm committed to the cross country or not. Now again, this is something that typically you do for the first few cross countries. I'm not saying this is necessarily a thing you do if you're trying to do a 300 or a 500K. But you've gone through the start line, you've chosen which route you're going to take, and we'll come on to that in a second. But normally there's a cloud ahead, or 2 clouds, or 3 clouds within the first 10K. And what you're trying to do is to head to those and say, does the experience of this cloud match what I've just been experiencing and match my forecast? Does it look similar to what I was doing beforehand? And if it does, then you get to the first cloud, you're 8K out, and you've lost 1,000 feet. So you've gone from being 4,000 feet to 3,000 feet. You're only 10K away, so you can still get back to Saltpeter. But you see the cloud, you go into the cloud, and beep, 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 you're climbing away. Happy days, it's working. And that's the point. You then say, okay, I'm going to climb to cloud base, and then I'm going to continue. If you get to it and it doesn't work, it's all soggy, and then you've chosen another cloud to go to, and you're now down to 2,500 feet, 10K away, and that doesn't work. Think about heading back. Is it just I'm flying badly, or is there something specific on the weather? But if you're not happy, if you've within the first 10K and you're still high enough to get back to Saltpeter, and you're not happy, go back, fly locally again, get high, and start over. And even I would say for a 300K, as long as you've started reasonably early, you can use this technique just to again break up the decision making. Which what we're trying to do with all of this is move away from I've got to do my cross country, I've got to do my cross country, I've got to do my cross country. I'm in a field because you're overloaded, into individual steps. The pre-flight planning, the launch, the local story, the start line, the first 10K. Right, we'll do routing through the air, and then we'll call it a day till next week. So routing through the air is all about maximizing the probability of staying up. And it's choosing a route that has the most options that give you the highest probability. So the typical choice you might have is 20 degrees to the north of my track. There are 3 or 4 okay looking clouds. Not amazing, but they look okay. They were working when I was flying locally. 20 degrees to south of my track, there is an amazing looking cloud, but it's by itself. It's one booming cloud. And you need to make the decision, do I take the 3 or 4 okay looking clouds, or do I take the one great looking cloud? Anyone got any thoughts as to which of those is the lower risk option?
The group of clouds.
The group of clouds.
Where's the wind coming from?
That's a good point. That's part of it. That's but the point I was trying to make is that you can the good looking cloud might well work, but if it doesn't, you've just burnt your options. If you've got 3 or 4 reasonable looking clouds, there's a good chance, assuming that they worked before and nothing's changed, that one of them will work. And that's what you need to do. So given the choice of one great looking cloud or 3 or 4 okay looking clouds, head towards the 3 or 4 okay looking clouds. Obviously you've got issues. Go on. Excellent. Very good point. So the idea is you're trying to maximize the probability of staying up. And as you're going along, you're making these decisions.
Paddy. Shush.
I'm sure it's not Paddy, but
Chris, you can mute Paddy. There you go. He's muted now. There you go. I did send him a message asking him to mute.
So this is a very unlikely picture that you'll see, but it gives you an idea of a decision you might have to make. So you're flying high. It's a particularly good day, and your track is, where you're aiming for is somewhere down the middle there. You've got to choose left or right. Any thoughts as to whether you choose the left-hand side or the right-hand side, or doesn't it matter?
Would prefer left.
Left, because there's
More
more sun
sun.
on the ground.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so on the if you look on the right, there's some big overdevelopment there. There's not much sun on the ground. Now that may be booming. It may be that you're going to have to pull the air brakes up toward going into cloud, but it might not. Look on the left, and you've got at least 3 clouds you can see there from the shadows. You've got one under this shadow, one under this shadow, one under this shadow. This, and on top look about the same. So you'd probably be heading for this dark area here, routing under there. If it works, climb. If it doesn't, there's another one here and another one here. And if you look in the distance, again, there's sunshine over here in the distance. Over here, it's looking a bit black and grim. And that's really the sort of routing decisions you make. Frankly, I would love to have a difficult decision like that every single time. What quite often we get is something that looks a bit more like this, where you're thinking, okay, I'm a bit lower now, and there's like a big area of cloud over here. Ahead, if you look carefully, so there's a couple of clouds there. There are actually some little wisps here. So you might decide, rather than heading for a big cloud over here, or indeed nice looking cloud in the very far away, you might decide, look, there's a couple of wisps here. There's another cloud here, another cloud here. That's kind of the direction I'm going to go. Actually, looking at this particular photo, you're getting quite low, so you'd be thinking also about landing options. But just ignore that for the time being. This is what I mean about choosing a direction to route in. That's the best looking cloud, but it's a long way away, and by the time you get there, it might not work anyway. You've got some options here, and don't these little wisps you can get. They may be decaying cloud. I've no idea, but they may also be these sort of clouds, or indeed this sort of cloud that's about to form. So when you're routing, if you were trying to get to this cloud here, hypothetically, you would route via these wisps here, because you may get some rising air. You may also get some stonking there. The other thing to do is not to get fixated. You're heading for this cloud here. Let's just say it's 8 kilometers away. Halfway there, you hit a stonking climb in the blue. Take the climb in the blue. Don't get fixated on necessarily the cloud you chose. The other thing, and this is a cut down version, we'll do more on following energy when we look at 300Ks. For those of you who haven't seen this before, this is a polar curve in still air of an asteroid, and basically it's not a polar curve, it's a best LD curve. So we've got LD here and speed here. It's basically saying that in still air, your best glide angle in an asteroid is 35. If you fly in just half a knot of rising air, the same asteroid all of a sudden takes on the characteristics in terms of glide angle of an 18-meter JS3. So flying in half a knot of rising air will upgrade your asteroid to an 18-meter JS3. Equally, if you're flying in half a knot of sinking air, your asteroid becomes a K8. So if we go back to this, if this is rising air, we don't know it is, but if it is, you can basically take your asteroid and really increase the, you're not climbing because the glider is sinking at 1.5 knots normally, but you're flying in half a knot of rising air, so that the sink goes down. It's a really good way of getting more gliding performance. And does it really matter for 50K or 100K? Probably not, but it's a good thing to practice. It absolutely matters when you're doing 100K. And really, the last bit on this, and then we'll finish for today, follow the energy. So not only are you looking at, well, you are looking at wisps. What you're not doing is just following the big pointy arrow, the line on the PDA that says, I must fly here to get to there. You're looking at, there are a few clouds over here, there are some wisps over here. And you're just routing through the better air. And that's something you can practice locally. You don't have to be flying cross country to do it. it'll make a massive difference to your flying, just routing through better air. Okay, I think that's where we're going to, yeah, that is where we're going to stop for today. Any questions or comments on that from anyone? We stop sharing.
Chris?
Yeah.
It's Gary. Hi.
Okay.
If you, I'm trying to get it in my head to ask the right question, especially with so many people listening. If you were setting yourself a task and you had that slide up earlier with the clouds and your task and track was dead ahead, however, you felt that wasn't working, but there's in the distance to your right hand side off your task, how do you calculate in your head how far to deviate from your task line, if that makes sense? Because you know to the right hand side, for example, X amount of nautical miles, there's a really good cloud.
It's a really good question, Gary.
Sorry?
So broadly speaking, a deviation, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Sorry, how do you calculate that in your head?
Okay, so there are two questions. One is how far away is the lift or potential lift, and the other one is how far do you deviate? The easiest way to work out how far away a cloud is to look on the shadow on the ground. That gives you a much better idea of whether something is 10k away or 2 or 3 kilometers away. So if you can identify the shadow, I won't put it back up, but that's a useful thing. In terms of deviation, pretty much up to about a 30-degree deviation will add very little to your task length. But again, you're not making a decision to divert 30 degrees because there's one cloud there. You're making a decision to divert because maybe there's a cloud street. So you might get, your task is due north, but this is where the wind is sort of north-northwest. There's a good line of energy, good line of clouds. You would absolutely fly up that. And then at some point, make the adjustment to go back to wherever you're heading for. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is just, they say, right, my PDA, my pointy arrow, my Garmin, whatever it is, says I need to fly on a course of 227 degrees. So I'm going to bloody well fly on a course of 227 degrees without deviating. Again, it's one of the reasons that you need to look out the window.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Also, Chris, following the energy might mean even going back in yourself on one of these early days, and you just got to have patience in that case. It's better to go back and top up than to push on into the blue and end up on the ground after 5 minutes, isn't it?
That's a really, really good point. There'll be times when you were going along and you were 4,000 feet and there's a 3-knot climb, and 4,000 feet and 3-knot climb, and 4,000 feet and 3-knot climb. Then all of a sudden you're down at 2,500 feet for some reason you can't work out. And it's possibly because the weather's changed or the weather's recycling. So absolutely a 90-degree turn because you realize you're actually running down the middle of 2 cloud streets, or indeed going back 5, 6, 7K. It'll be a lot less damaging to your cross country than any in the field because you pushed on. And again, these are things that are different when you're doing your first few cross countries or even a 300K, different from the decisions you might make when you're racing. So don't confuse the two. It's a very, very different sport. So yeah, your job as a cross country pilot is to stay airborne. If you stay airborne, there's a good chance you'll get round. If you push on and push on and push on and end up in the field, you ain't going to get round. Does that answer the question, Gary?
Sorry, just unmuted. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Phil, I'll let you stop the recording and send the file. Sorry, I missed out the first bit. Thank you very much for attending. Next week we'll do the second half of this, which looks at some more aspects of your first cross countries, including speed to fly, but also turn points, final gliding, and field selection should we need it.
Sorry, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris from Phil, I think you have to give me permission again to stop the recording.
Maybe I can stop it. Oh, actually, I can stop it. Bear with me.